I'm sure a lot of us are faced with something similar to this. This is the stairway coming from the garage down into the basement. It's actually a finished basement, and they use this stairway quite often, but it has never been finish tape. It's just basically what we call fire tape. So I'm gonna clean this up a little bit and put the fill coat over it. It's kind of funny, this outside off-angle corner here is actually put on backwards, but I think I can work with that. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to tape the seams. So this is a beveled edge seam. I'm going to use my 6-inch knife and a curved trowel, and I'm going to be using all-purpose lightweight compound. Put some on my trowel. Now I'm going to take my taping knife and just put it over the seam. I'm guessing that's around 9 inches wide or 8 inches. I'm going to coat pretty much the whole seam right off the bat before I even start smoothing anything out. Now I've got a generous amount of compound on there, so I'm going to just start smoothing it out using my curved trowel. I want the edges to be feathered out nicely and the center to be slightly crowned. So typically, the way I'm going to try and do that is I take my trowel and putting a lot of pressure on the top. And you can see how I just feather that top edge right out. Same thing on the bottom. Putting a lot of pressure on the bottom of the trowel, bottom edge of the trowel. And now I got both edges nice and feathered out. Because this is a curved trowel, now I can just pull it along that seam. Because there's actually a concave surface on this, I leave a slightly crowned seam and to keep the edges feathered out. Usually you have to go over it multiple times to get it nice and smooth and pretty much bubble free. I'm going to coat the other seams as well. I have an intersecting seam on this wall. I'm going to put a quick coat of compound over that. I have thinned this compound down just a little bit because that helps it to be easier to work with. Notice it's not so thin it's running off my trowel or anything, but it's been mixed and thinned with water just a little bit. Makes it a lot more workable. Feathering those edges in. Now taking the trowel and smoothing the center out. I am putting quite a bit of pressure on the trowel as I'm pushing in. That helps eliminate some of the air bubbles as well. If you are having problems with air bubbles, notice how when I coated this seam back here, I always went in this direction. But let's say I had a lot of problems with air bubbles, which I didn't really, but let's say I did. Just pulling the trowel back in the opposite direction will eliminate a lot of those air bubbles. Okay, what I've got here is I already have the seams second coated. So I got the fill coat on the seams, but nothing in the corners yet. These corners have just got the tape embedded quite some time ago. And now I'm going to put one of the finish coats over it. So the way you do inside corners is one edge gets done at a time. Like today, let's just point out up here in this three-way. Today I'm going to coat this side here on the wall, this side up here on the wall and ceiling intersection, and then actually this corner up here on the ceiling. So it's 1, 2, 3 edges. So each side just gets one coat of compound. So I'm going to try to get it really nice and smooth and cover all this tape. And then when it's dry, I come through and I do the 3 opposite edges. So this inside corner along this wall, do this side today. And then when it's dry, I'll do the opposing side. All right, I've got the fill coat on. All the seams are taped. All the inside corners are coated. Fasteners are coated. Gonna let this dry and I can put the finish coat on. Yesterday I came through and I put the first coat on these inside corners. So I have a coat on one edge of each side of the corner. So in other words, I have the ceiling done over there, the wall ceiling intersection, and the left side of this inside corner. I didn't actually get any video of that yesterday, but it doesn't really matter because today I'm going to put the finish coat on these corners, and so I'm coating the opposite edge. That will be the same method I use when I put the first coat on these corners. So what I did yesterday is actually the same thing I'm doing today, but I'm doing it on the opposite edge. So I don't do any sanding. I'm just, if there's a little chunk of compound, I'm just scraping it off the edge of my knife. But it looks pretty good. So each side only gets one coat of joint compound. So today I'm doing this edge, and it's going to end up looking pretty nice up in this upper corner as well, because this is a finished coat on that corner. So I've hit it a couple times already. Once when the tape was embedded, and then our first coat yesterday, and now the opposite edge. So this is going to look really nice and clean up in this corner when I'm done. So I've applied some compound to each edge. Now I'm going to start smoothing it out. The first thing I do when I smooth it out is I cut in that bottom edge, or the edge away from the corner, so it's nice and tight. So right now here I'm just pulling along that edge and blend it in nice and tight so I don't have a thick amount of compound. Now I'm going to start smoothing the compound out. So I'm just pulling my taping knife along that inside corner, keeping it flat. When I'm trying to smooth compound as opposed to remove compound, you keep the taping knife nice and flat. It's flat and square to the corner. Like when I do this top edge, you'll see nice and square to that corner. When I keep it square, it prevents some of the compound from going on to the other edge. It doesn't prevent it completely, but it really helps. Just keep it flat and square into that corner. And right here, I'm spending a little more time up in this three-way intersection, because this is the last time it's gonna be coated with compound. I want to get it as nice as possible. Keep in mind, we are going to sand this later, so any little imperfections will disappear. Now I'm going to put the finish coat on these seams. I didn't do any sanding. It's a small area here, so I'm really not going to bother with any sanding. But I see I have a little tool mark right there. I just take my taping knife and just scrape off any chunks or any tool marks that I see. And that's all I really have to do, because it's pretty smooth to start with. So, using the same lightweight compound, just applying it over the seam. I'm using my 12-inch knife. This compound is pretty good. It could be a little thinner, but I'm not going to bother thinning it down because this is just a very small area. But you can see what I'm doing. I'm applying the compound wider than what was there. And now I'm taking my 12-inch knife and I'm going to remove that compound. See how I'm keeping that bottom edge feather right in? And the same thing on the top. I'm going to get that feathered right in really nice. Now, I see I have a little extra compound left in the middle, and I just remove that. Keeping this inside corner clean. All right, right here I have where I have the seams intersecting the inside corners. You can see I've got the finished edge done now. And there's the three-way all pointed up nice. See, I have edges feathered in. I do have a little bit of compound over the other edge, you can see, but that's all gonna be sanded out, so it's not a worry. I'm back today, ready to sand. Everything's nice and dry. This is the seam. Looking pretty good. As you can see, I've got to feather out the edges. There are a little bit of tool marks here and there. Up here in this outside off angle, it's looking a little rough, but I have got plenty of compound on there, so it's gonna sand out really nicely. Same with this inside corner. You can see that there are some tool marks and little chunks of joint compound, but all that is gonna sand right out, look real good. Down here I've got the repair for these nail pops. That's nice and dry, looking pretty flat. It's gonna shape up real nice. Be ready to paint in a few minutes. What I use for my sanding is, I use a pole sander, but the pole sander is a round sander that has a 220 grit paper on it. So that's what I'm gonna do the rough hand sanding with. And then I'm gonna do all the touch-up sanding with this sanding sponge. It's good for getting into the inside corners. It's got a smoother side and a little coarser. These are the two tools that I'm going to be using to do my sanding here.